and welcome to Conversations with Mother Earth, brought to you by Grounded Press. My name is Dana Petrovic, and each week my guests and I explore one aspect of Mother Earth and the gifts that she gives us. We also discuss why these gifts are so precious and why we should value them. We got you curious? Good. We love curiosity. Coffee. Finally, I can talk about coffee. For Conversations with Mother Earth, episode number 1, I shared a talk about organic chocolate. Now, after more than 20 other episodes, and towards the end of the series, it's time to talk about another tasty treat, namely coffee. Whether we are coffee imbibers or not, we all are familiar with how coffee can affect our mood, and the internet is filled with memes about coffee addiction. I and many of my acquaintances love coffee, and we are not alone. Over 60% of Americans do as well. Among the Europeans, the Dutch lead the list of coffee lovers, and the Italians, which was really a surprise to me, are in the lower half of EU countries. Even here in China, the number of coffee lovers is growing rapidly, and Starbucks can be found on almost every corner in major cities. And homegrown Chinese franchise brands like Luckin Coffee further drive the growing demand for coffee consumption. Coffee, however, is not only a beverage that supplies us with our morning energy boost. More importantly, it also fuels our social connections. In my native country of Croatia, having a coffee with friends offers a reason to share the latest gossip, especially if it can also be done as an excuse to escape the office. And in some places in Europe, one's fortune can be predicted from the coffee grounds pattern at the bottom of the cup. Today, our guest on Conversations with Mother Earth is Matthew Roebuck. And although I do not believe he will foretell your future, I invited him because of his work expertise gained at Quijote Cafe from Hamburg, Germany, which is setting new standards within the coffee industry. Matt, a very warm welcome to Conversations with Mother Earth.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity, Dana. Looking forward to our conversation.
Matt, Quijote Cafe was recommended to me when I inquired about a coffee roasting company with transparent procedures and standards. What makes Quijote Cafe unique in the coffee industry?
Quijote Cafe is it's a collective. We buy directly from cooperatives that are also democratically structured, with whom we maintain long-term relationships. And the focus is on long-term relationships, getting the organic coffee from the fixed teams that are also working in democratic manner.
What do you mean with democratic manner?
It's a cooperative and collective, so the decision-making happens together. This is how we work, and also the collectives that are responsible for the existence of the coffee.
Oh, interesting. And so, as you mentioned, you work with cooperatives, read also small landowners and so on. How do you ensure the quality and the transparency along the supply chain?
There's unfortunately in this year it was not possible in the regular rhythm, but usually we visit at least once every year, and have producers also visit us in Hamburg to keep the exchange going on. And since it's the import is an ongoing process, we're in permanent communication with the suppliers.
Oh, interesting.
So if there's questions coming up, we can always ask directly, because import requires a few hundred emails anyway. So.
Oh, wow.
And
Wow. And this is just the work on your side. Wow.
Yeah, so the communication is permanent, so to speak.
Wow, that is very, that's a lot. That is an inflow of emails. And dear listeners, you and I receive lots of emails per day too. So we know how that feels. And we'll come to the other side of the work. This is just the office work. But does your work directly with your direct import with coffee farmers, does this have an effect on your price for consumers? And what is in that, if there is an increased price, what is the added value for the consumers?
Well, we give the prices, one of our key aspects is transparency. So this is one of our core DNA of Quijote Coffee, is that we make our calculation and the prices we pay in origin transparent. So we are just passing this price on to the consumer, so to speak. And if we compare this kind of quality coffee with the ones offered by some other roasteries, the price is not necessarily higher, because also we have a limitation on the privatization of profits. This is also in our baseline, so to speak, that we will not privatize more profit than the average working wage in Hamburg.
Okay.
Yes. So and therefore that we're not actively promoting, or we're not paying for ads. Yeah, and we have quite high volume that we're pushing. It's possible to offer a very good quality product as a reasonable price. There's also a factor which is called the return to origin, which communicates how much of the price that the consumers are paying is going back to origin. And our coffees are at around 27 to 32% return to origin, yes, which is relatively high.
That's really an interesting thought. So in a sense, with your company defining that they actually, the standard income, a good German income is enough for them. They don't need to earn more at the cost of somebody else. That actually guarantees that everybody has enough, doesn't it?
Exactly. Coffee is one of the products that really offer that all the people along the value chain can do good work and have a good income by it. Yeah, and also the profits that we generate above the Hamburg working wage, we invest them either in the company to process more volume, or in origin to increase the prices, which has been is happening with this harvest, because prices all around the world are increasing. Yeah,
of course. We discussed the coffee popularity is growing, which if you don't increase the amount, it will drive the price up. We know this from economics. That's Matt, but you mentioned on your side lots of work with coffee. It's not just roasting; it's the whole import process. It's everything going around. But on the other side, the farmers who are working with the plant itself and who grow coffee, they have the majority of work, actually. Tell us about these farmers. Where is your coffee from? How much work does actually go into the production of a cup of coffee for us in the morning? And maybe can you share some stories with our listeners?
Yes, like you said, Dana, the majority of work is really in the origin, and also the majority of the risk, because to get coffee to an export feasible state, it's a quite long road. So when you plant the coffee, it's at least 2, more likely 3 years that you can expect starting to harvest. So during all of this time, you have to manage the field, keep it clean, also manage some pests or difficulties if there's some problems coming up, pruning the plant. And then when it comes to the stage that it's bearing fruit, it's also very labor intense to selectively collect the ripe cherries. Then you go to the next stage, which is the processing. So depending on the processing style, you either need some equipment to remove the seed from the fruit and then let it undergo kind of a fermentation, which always also poses a risk, especially in a tropical country. And then you have to be lucky with the weather to get the coffee dried down without any over fermentation, mold developing. So also you need space and you need to move it around. It's very labor intense. And then the final stage, when the coffee is dry enough, the transport to the Centro de Acopio, or the cooperative where the coffee is being purchased from the cooperative, is the final stage. So it's a lot of work, and it's spanning years from start to first export feasible crop harvest.
A good reason to see our next morning coffee now while we enjoy with a good dose of gratitude, in addition to sugar or milk or whatever we add to it. A good dose of gratitude for all these workers who are working along the supply chain. I on my side already thank them for their hard work.
It's a beautiful work also. The only problem is that it's difficult to make a living income with it, because prices, generally speaking, are many times below production costs. So to produce coffee, of course, you need to pre-finance as a producer. And this is also one of the things that Quijote Coffee is doing, because in order to pay the workers, to get the infrastructure ready and everything, the producer is confronted with costs. And Quijote Coffee is pre-financing 60% of each harvest to ensure, because in the cold countries, so to speak, we have very reasonable access to credits also.
Yes.
Generally speaking, we're in the tropical country, credit is very expensive, often 20-30%. So pre-financing is also crucial to have this, to share this burden of the risk.
That's an additional, of course, as a farmer in Kenya, if you walk into a bank, not being extremely wealthy, or I mean, I'm justifying now, Kenya is a wonderful country. I'm not saying, it just came to my mind because we had an episode in Kenya about the ground as well. So this is why I just thought about Kenya. I don't want to have any prejudices, but in general, in any of the other country, if you know how it is, if you as a farmer without not much income and much money coming to the bank, they'll say, how do you secure your loan? Yes, that's a very interesting thought that your company thought of. So you actually pre-finance the production. You pre-finance your own coffee.
Yes, this has another advantage, that we're kind of securing the supply by this, and we're strengthening the relationship, and also we're sharing the burden of the financing that has to be done anyways.
You really create a relationship. You really have a bond, because the farmer is not left alone with this risk, and you have less risk because you know your coffee will come in.
Yes, with some teams we've been working since 10 years or since 11 years now, and now in the crisis, when the prices go very high, it has proved the good tactic to maintain this honest long-term relationship, because this coffee is still we're still having access to the coffee in the same situation that many other cooperatives or many other producers have been tempted to sell the coffee on the doorstep to Coyotes, so to speak, that offer a higher price because the world market price is so high right now. So it takes reliability or long-term interest along every step of the value chain. So now it has been paying off all the time, but now was a good example of why exactly this practice is good.
Yeah, Exactly. When everybody wins, in times of when everything goes right, as we know from life in general, everything we don't feel that, but when times get tough, we see who we have exactly, and you have your farmers and a strong bond. This is so simple. This is so simple yet so brilliant. And very often the simple things are at the same time so brilliant in their simplicity. So this could become I don't know, a mode to copy for other companies, working together, a win-win for everybody. That's the only way we can win. All of us win.
Yes, depending on the product, I think this is going to be the future, so to speak, because also this kind of clean quality that we're speaking about, which is really clean quality product from a clean ecosystem, people working in it, having good condition, good life. This is the kind of product that you want to consume. And especially with the mild drugs, so to speak, so coffee, tea, chocolate, this are the kind of high value products that are pretty dense, that there's a growing demand, like you also mentioned. And just to secure the source, this is the way that you're going to have to work in the future, because I think long term more and more teams are gonna get on this, are gonna be about the long term.
Yes, it's an organic coffee, just like it was when we talked about organic chocolate. You also supply organic coffee.
Yes, all of the coffees are grown organically, and all of them are certified except 2 teams in the Rio Napo in the Amazon rainforest in Ecuador. They were not certified, but they're working in a manner that could be not more sustainable. It's a so-called chakra system of growing, which is parcels of 1 to 2 hectares, and they're cultivating about 180 different plants there. So it's super biodynamic. They have no certifications, but they're working really clean. And also we do not communicate any certifications such as organic, fair trade, SPP, UTZ, because the transparency is kind of our certification. We just communicate our calculation, we communicate the source, and that's more valuable to us than to communicate a certification, because in this kind of agribusiness, the certification or the work with the certification is its own kind of business also.
Yeah, there are some valuable ones, but it's also not always very transparent. But it's, I mean, there is more to that, because there is also a long-term effect of paying the farmer a fair price, because a family can send children to school. You know, the next generation of children is getting educated. If there will be coffee farmers, we will see. But there's a next generation of children that can go to school because they don't need, family can afford it. And all of that, we might see next engineer, next who knows what, next astronaut, who knows. But it's because people have a fair share, a fair income, which is, we in Europe or in most countries, Western countries, take for granted. So this is that we can do that just by choosing which coffee we drink is incredible.
Yeah, I mean, with everything you consume, coffee is one of the products where you can really tell the difference, also flavor-wise, and coffee is kind of a poster product for fair trade or bad conditions within products grown in the tropical countries. So it's a kind of a famous example, but in the end, it's like this with every product, right? Cotton, sugar, pepper, absolutely everything. But with hazelnuts, for example, it's the same topic, so to speak, but people care much less because the differences perceived among different hazelnuts are not so strong like in different coffees.
Yes. Yeah, and the hazelnut goes goes into the chocolate, so it's a byproduct, and it's not so much in our so present. You're right. On a different note, what occurred to me, I teach the circular economy, and in a circular economy, there is no waste when producing goods. So what I realized is that there are companies from Berlin and Hamburg, another company from Hamburg that actually uses the shell of the coffee cherry to produce drinks, because there is a caffeine in it, although it's not the coffee itself, but it still has quite a bit of caffeine. And they use this shell, which is a waste product. And you know how it is with waste products, raw material, cost of buying this raw material are next to nothing, because people rather get rid of this. So how is it for your company, Quijote Coffee? How do you work with waste?
Cascada, the one you mentioned, is a very interesting product. Actually contains lots of caffeine because it's the fruit, which contains the natural insecticide to keep the insects away. And that's
really
interesting. Yeah, it's a very interesting beverage, and also can be very sweet. And actually, to make cascara to consume is also relatively a lot of work, because you got to spread it out and dry it very evenly. So that's not kind of a waste product, but it's like making reuse of a product that elsewise also would not be waste, but would be turned into fertilizer. Usually the coffee pulp is being turned into fertilizer, but it's definitely generating more value if you can have it as an own beverage. Yeah. Within Quijote Cafe, the way we address the byproducts that we generate, which is the chaff when roasting the bean, and you have the expansion of the bean, and there's a small silver skin that's going off and being separated, which is about 2 large buckets a day. Yes, we also use that as a fertilizer and just mix it under the soil within the acquaintances. Yeah. And then we have the burlap bags that the coffee is packed in. These we sell, and with the profits we generate from that, we invested also in coffee projects, such as paying for quality evaluation position, like cupping position in Arabica in Ecuador is one of the projects. And we sell one burlap bag for $3, so it also generates a few thousand. Yeah, which is also not waste, because you can make parts of it and everything. And then the third byproduct from coffee is after brewing the grounds. I'm sure you can make some very nice cosmetical products from it, because it contains lots of high value fat. And also just using it as a peeling on your hands, the particles are also cleansing, and you can grow mushrooms in it very well, oyster mushrooms.
Yes. Yeah,
we're not doing that.
Good. Yeah.
We're not doing that. We're also using it just in the compost fertilizer, but it's possible. So
yeah, lots of varieties of lots of options with coffee waste. Is such a valuable product. And one of the things, and this is out of curiosity, we read tell our listeners about the major differences, because we read this is Arabica type and this is Robusta and all that. What is really the difference between these, Matt?
Arabica coffee is the highland coffee, like the fine, mild coffee, growing, generally speaking, in altitude between 1,000 and 2,000 meters. It's the fine one. It contains less caffeine, about 1 to 2%. The plant is relatively susceptible to pests, and the production is pretty good. And you have one of the most aromatic foods. It contains 800 to 1,000 volatile aromatic compounds after it's roasted. So, and also Arabica coffee is rooting very deep, because it's just different in the higher altitude, because the nutrients are a little bit more down. So also the roots go more deep. And like we mentioned, caffeine being the natural insecticide, up there in the high elevation, there's not so many insects. Whereas Robusta coffee, which is the lowland coffee, it contains lots of caffeine, about 2 to 4%. It has massive production. The roots go more on the surface of the soil, because that whole humus is there. So the nutrition of the plant is working a little bit different. And it's about half as complex, about 400 volatile compounds, aromatic compounds. And the flavor profile whereas Arabica is like fine, floral, sweet, fruity. Robusta coffee is more like chocolatey, woody. It's more like the base. It's good for espresso. And also there's many hybrids. So based on the natural occurring Timor hybrid, which was in Timor-Leste, East Timor,
Yeah.
there was two plantations, Arabica and Robusta, and the natural hybrid occurred, which is the Timor hybrid. And based on this combined genetic, which is in between two species, it was crossed with many other varieties that have good cup characteristics, like Catura, the dwarf Bourbon, and that's where that whole Catimor family comes from. So hybrids are also a huge topic within coffee, especially in the medium altitude.
Yeah, that's a friend of mine comes from Jamaica, and she tells me that Blue Mountain coffee, which I do love, is the best in the world. I do love the Blue Mountain, but I'm not sure if that's the case. I wanted to ask you, as a coffee expert, is that the truth?
I mean, there's many coffees that are named like the best coffees, and I think from an old school point of view, Blue Mountain is definitely a classic because it's very sweet, pretty full body, very smooth, and relatively low acidity, which is typical for island coffees. Yeah. Among coffee enthusiasts, many times the fine coffees from Jirgasher for Central America are highlighted as the favorites, but for me, it's all about the variety. It's really the fun. I can even enjoy like lowland Robusta just brewed as a filter, because it's always about that terroir thought. You're always consuming that coffee from that place. It's interesting that that's different than that. Yeah, generally speaking, I like juicy, full coffees. Yeah.
And if you look at the country, from which country do you like the coffee the most?
If I could only drink coffees from one country, it would probably be Colombia, because it's so versatile. There's so many different microclimates and everything, so many varieties, such high skill in processing that you can get kind of every flavor profile from there. But this is true for many countries, so yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Difficult choice.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And so lots of these countries were hurt by internal events. Colombia was one of them. I also read a few days ago that Sudan is now growing coffee, a country that was hurt by a really prolonged war. Is not really getting completely to peace, as we read from the latest political news, but there are coffee growers in that country, which means jobs, and that was really good news. So when we look at the supply chain, how many people work along this coffee supply chain? How many jobs are created with our love for coffee?
There's about 125 million people working full-time in coffee around the world. And about 25 million of these are producers. So coffee is huge. And in many countries, it's also driving economic factor, being one of the major export products. And they're generating a good share of the GDP. So if it's going well with the coffee, that will most likely have a positive impact on the country and maybe a society.
Matt, when we look at these countries, we cover really a vast area around the world, which you call the tropical region where coffee grows, because coffee does not grow in Germany, as obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be importing it. But this is such a diverse area. How do you see that in the coffee growing business, this cultural diversity or this historical diversity? How is that represented?
It's very interesting, because all across the value chain you have different customs and traditions and methods to process the coffee. like in Yemen, just trying the full fruit on the roofs, and the terrace cultivation, which is world famous. And the different style, like the washed coffees in Colombia, and the preparation in the sock, and then all the different preparation styles. It's just a cultural thing, like you mentioned earlier, also to get together with friends, and especially consuming. I think when humans consume something together, that really makes a connection, because you're nurturing yourself from the same thing. So I think that coffee culture all along the value chain is also such an interesting topic, from different processing styles to different consumption habits. Coffee can really be a bridge between the people.
Yeah, it's a great connection. This makes me also think the growing, what you said, where it grows. I again refer to the episode number 5 about soil, and how important is the quality of soil, and how it's grown, how that also goes into us, into our body. And we do that with coffee too, like we do it with any other food we consume. Coffee also goes into our body. That is truly interesting. That's so much that we're enjoying our cup of coffee that we actually enjoy so much, and we are not even aware of it. Not only the hard labor, but also the cultural differences play a role.
All the culture that goes into growing, the different style of growing, but also the different style of roasting, espresso culture, and all of that. It's really a combination of many things that make humans, like building a coffee shop. Kind of every craft can be realized through coffee. It's a mix of science, art, everything.
And history
logistics,
too.
History,
Logistics, technology, but also history, because some countries are longer coffee growers than the others.
Yeah, super interesting.
Yeah, especially if you refer back to the chocolate, which I mentioned at the beginning. I mean, we have thousands of years of chocolate growing. It's not something that just is recent phenomenon. It was even money. It was more valuable than gold and all that. Yeah, our world is so diverse and so beautiful. Thank you for this insight.
Yeah, thanks, Anna.
This is a really great conversation. I could go for quite some time with you about Quijote Cafe and your work there. And of course, I have to see if I can get your coffee here in China. I doubt that, but I do encourage our listeners to read about your company and to reach out. So how can our listeners find more about Quijote Cafe, and how can they get in touch with you?
That would be Quijote Cafe. So Quijote, like Don Quixote from the Mancha, Quijote minus Kaffee, KAFFEE.de. And to reach out would be info@Quijote minus coffee. info@quijotecafe.de.
Yes, it's a German company, dear listeners. So cafe is written the German way with the K, not with C like in English, and it's .de. So please bear that in mind. I highly recommend that you do visit the website, and that we all support your work all together, because together we can make sure that also your company gains more customers, and then more and more we reach out to more and more farmers. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was a truly insightful conversation, Matt.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gordana.
This concludes today's conversation with Mother Earth. Dear listeners, I hope you have found a new renewable energy in a cup now. And that's when you look at that source of your new renewable energy, that you appreciate and value so many people who worked hard, because with every purchase of a premium coffee, we show our appreciation for their hard labor. This concludes today's conversation. I thank you for joining us, and next week we will talk about diversity. Stay tuned.